and I'm delighted you could all come. As we have done with our other public speaker series, we actually are taping it so that other people will be watching it, and then if you want to go back and watch it again, that would be great. So this is our 5th and final public speakers series, so I'm glad you could come, and it's nice to see some students and staff and faculty. So before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the territory in which we gather as the ancestral homeland of the Beothuk and the island of Newfoundland as the ancestral homeland of the Mi'kmaq and the Beothuk. I would also like to recognize the Inuit of Nunatsiavut and Nunatuvut and the Inuit of Atassiman and their ancestors as the original people of Labrador. We strive for respectful relationship with all of the peoples of this province as we search for collective healing and true reconciliation and honor this beautiful land together. So the Faculty of Medicine over the past 10 years set a priority to attract Aboriginal students to the medical profession by providing support through our various pathway programs. And this year, as you know, we're celebrating our 50th anniversary, and as we look to the future, we're developing goals that will advance and strengthen our collaborations with Aboriginal communities. And in our new strategic plan, which will be launched December 5th, we've actually put in our mission statement, Indigenous people. We have 2 special guests with us this evening, and I'd like to welcome Chief Meisel Joe and Catharyn Andersen to the Faculty of Medicine. I'm sure Chief Joe doesn't need any introduction, but Chief Meisel Joe was born in Mi'kmaq into a strong Mi'kmaq family, and since 1973 has been involved in First Nation politics, first as a counselor and then as a traditional Saugama, and the Newfoundland District Chief of the Mi'kmaq Grand Council. Chief Joe is currently in his 12th consecutive 2-year term as Administrative Chief.
Damn that big person.
And he's still standing. So Chief Joe is also the spiritual leader of his people and has gained recognition provincially, nationally, and internationally, particularly in the area of spiritual healing. Chief Joe is committed to preserving the language, culture, and traditions of his people. He also plays a very public role in presenting a better understanding of the Mi'kmaq people of Mi'kmaq to residents of this province and country. He is a published author of 2 books and a published poet. In May of 2004, Chief Joe was awarded an Honorary Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, by Memorial University of Newfoundland in recognition of his contribution to the economic, social, and political development of the Mi'kmaq people of Newfoundland and Labrador. This year, Chief Joe will receive the Order of Canada for his outstanding achievement, dedication to preserving the language, tradition, and culture of the Mi'kmaq people. Our second panelist is Catharyn Andersen, and she's a special advisor to the President on Aboriginal Affairs at Memorial University. She's Inuit and was born and raised in Nunatsiavut, northern Labrador. In her present role, Catharyn is working to advance Aboriginal initiatives at Memorial University, leading and coordinating internal multi-campus activities related to Aboriginal education and research, leading the development of a university-wide strategic indigenization plan, managing the Aboriginal Affairs Office, taking an interest in the recruitment and success of Aboriginal students, developing and strengthening partnerships with Aboriginal communities, and representing Memorial University with Aboriginal communities and stakeholders, as well as with the federal and provincial governments. Catharyn also has significant experience working with the Nunatsiavut government, having previously served in the roles of director and I apologize, language program coordinator with the Toongassut Cultural Center in Maine, Labrador from 1999 to 2008. She also worked as Harbor Operations Officer with the Small Craft Harbors Branch of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada in St. John's from 2011 to 2015. Catharyn holds a Bachelor of Arts in Linguistics, a Master of Arts in Linguistics, and a Master's of Business Administration from Memorial University, as well as an International Baccalaureate Diploma from Lester D. Pearson United World College of the Pacific in Victoria, BC. Our moderator this evening is Dr. Carolyn Sturge-Sparks, and she's the coordinator of the Faculty of Medicine's Aboriginal Health Initiative and clinical assistant professor in the Division of Community Health and Humanities. The primary mandate of the Aboriginal Health Initiative is to recruit Indigenous students from the province into medical school. In her professorship role, Carolyn implements curricular experiences to both undergraduate and postgraduate students about Indigenous peoples and their well-being. The aim of these sessions is to nurture awareness of how to provide culturally safe healthcare to Indigenous patients, their families, and communities. So we're here today to talk about the past, present, and future relationship of the Indigenous communities with the Faculty of Medicine and the education and training of physicians. And now I'll hand it over to Carolyn.
Thank you very much, Dr. Steele, and welcome everybody here. We're so happy that you've come and listened to Chief Joe and to Catharyn Andersen to share their thoughts with you. So in keeping with the theme, our focus is going to be on the past, present, and future of our relationships with the Indigenous people of the province, with the Faculty of Medicine, and with physician education. So that's going to be the theme of our discussion tonight. So I'm going to talk or start first of all with our first question, looking at the past. I want you to think way back, okay? So I'd like for you to share with us your thoughts on, for example, your observations and from your discussions with community members of what the relationship was like with people in your community, with the healthcare professionals, especially physicians, and your feelings about that type of relationship and from the experiences that you've heard. So Catharyn, would you like to start with that? Or
actually let Chief Joe
okay.
start first.
You sure?
Yeah.
yeah.
I can go back 70 years anyway. And thank you for the invitation to be here, and it's great to be working with Catharyn. And great to come to this fine facility that you have here. It's a movie set. Feels like it anyway. In regards to medical facilities or doctors, nurses, in the past, we didn't have any. There was no relationship because we simply didn't have one. When I grew up in Con River, if you wanted to go, you had to go to the hospital. You had to get on an old coastal steamer, they used to call back then, and down to Harbour Breton was the nearest cottage hospital. When I was 5 years old, I believe I got sick, and in the middle of the night, my dad and my family had to hire some guy with a boat, took us into Hermitage, and then from there over to I think Jersey Harbor. If you know the coast at all down that way, when you get to Jersey Harbor, it's a mountain to climb up and over and down the other side, and you had to cross the harbor to get to the cottage hospital. Well, my dad and other people carried me on their back when they got there. So that was my first encounter with medical people in my life anyway. My mom tells a great story. Says I wouldn't go unless I took what she called my piss bottle along. Well, you have to have priorities, right? But anyway, she passed away a few years ago, and I wanted to have that pot, but no. My sister took it just so she can bug me. But, we didn't start having connections to the outside world until, to a big degree, until the 60s, when there was a clinic set up in Milltown and was one in St. Albans, and we had no road connection. So if you want to go to see a doctor, you had to get on a boat, you had to go across the bay, which is 2 miles, and go across the bay. And in most cases, you didn't have the same kind of relationship with the doctors that you would have today. You couldn't go in and sit down and have a good talk about what your concerns are. You went in, and you told the doctor what your problem was. He either give you pills or he told you to go home. In some cases, not do anything. And so it's been good and it's been bad. When it was bad, it was really bad. When it got good, it get better and better because we become more educated about what we want, what we need, what we should have, and what a doctor should be like, or what a nurse should be like, or what a nurse practitioner should be like. We no longer have to accept the kind of discrimination that we had in the past. And my brother tells me this story, and not too long ago, he went to a doctor in Grand Falls, and he said, asked my brother, do you drink? And he said, no. He said, you're lying. He said, everybody in Conroe drinks. We all know that. So it's that kind of information, I wanted to go over and I want to talk to him. He said, no, leave him, because you're not going to change anything. I said, well, yeah, we can. We can change those things by talking and communicate to people that those things are not acceptable. And a lot of what we talk about and feel today come from fear, either from the churches or government or anyone that had any authority was someone to be feared because they could really do you harm in many ways. And we have enough stories in Conroe to tell you about our CMP coming in the community. I know that's not about the medical part of it, but it's still about our lives as Aboriginal people living in the community. About an RCMP officer coming into the community and taking moose liver off the stove because it was shot at what he called poached. And taking my uncle out of bed because he shot the moose and made him go and show where the moose was shot. And he said, of course I will. You want it? If you're hungry enough, I'll show you where the moose is. And he did. And for that, they took him on a boat for 30 days, and that's where he spent his time on the boat, going up and down the coast, because he had what they call, I think it was a RCMP cutter with a magistrate on board that did court along the coast. So when he come back, his story was, geez, it was good. They fed me, they give me clothes. I want to go back. So, we've learned ourselves as we grow more and more into accepting that doctors is not the beginning, the end of all the things we need to do. Because we're now learning that we have to take responsibility ourselves for the things that we do, the things that we eat, and the things that ails us. And if we don't have a good working relationship with a doctor, then we'll find another doctor. And that's what it's all about. And I'm so glad that John Nick is here. He's our first doctor out of Conroe. God love you. I really mean that. And I want to be your first patient, but you said no. Anyway, I'll pass this back to Catharyn.
Thank you. Okay. So I guess I'll just a bit about where I'm from, because I think providing that context will help a little bit. I'm from Northern Labrador. I grew up in McColvick. I always say I have two hometowns, McColvick and Nain. Grew up primarily in McColvick, but spent a lot of time in Nain as a child, and then after graduating university, spent most of my adult life working in Nain in between coming out to university. The North Coastal Labrador is 6 communities. There's no road system going into the community, so you can access by plane or by boat or by skidoo in the winter. And each of the communities now has a clinic, but we don't have doctors year-round. Doctors fly in. I'm not sure what the schedule is right now, but I recall when I last lived on the coast, it was about once a month. So when I was thinking about, now, I hadn't really thought about way back.
70 years?
Yeah, about 70 years. But in my lifetime, I was thinking, trying to think of my experiences with doctors, and I never really had many on the coast. I guess I was fortunate in a way that I never had a condition serious enough to have to see a doctor, because generally when doctors came into the community, it was the most serious cases that were seen. And I think one of the things that struck me about that was when I was a student here at Memorial, I would go to the campus clinic. But when I decided to move to St. John's and went to get a family doctor, it struck me that that was the first time that I'd been to a doctor who had seen me before, where I could walk into the doctor and they would say, "Oh, hi, Catharyn. How are you doing? How is this? Da, 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 da." I'd never had that experience before, and only until I was in my late 30s, I guess, had I had that experience. And I guess for me that struck me as, and knowing people here in St. John's who've had doctors, family doctors, for 40 years, 50 years, just that experience in and of itself, I think, is very different. So my sister-in-law, for example, I was talking with her the other day in preparation for tonight, and she's here in St. John's now. She's pregnant and waiting to have her baby, because you can't deliver on the North Coastal Labrador, so you have to fly out either to Goose Bay or here to St. John's. She decided to come to St. John's because both her and my brother have family here. So, but during her pregnancy, her prenatal visits in Maine, when she went to the clinic, it was a different nurse every time. So she could, even with the nurses, every experience at the hospital was someone getting familiar with her file and just not being able to walk in and the nurse or the doctor having some knowledge about that. But so I hadn't thought about years back, but just hearing Chief Joe speak, years ago, I heard stories of my aunts and uncles and other community members who often had to leave the community if they had an illness, and a lot of times they were sent to St. Anthony, and a lot of times it was for months or years at a time, and in a lot of cases, young people were sent out and could be gone for 2 years, and in that time they're in the hospital. No one speaks Inuktitut, so they have to learn. If they may have known a little bit of English, but if they didn't know any English, they had to learn the language. And then not having spoken Inuktitut for that length of time, they come back to the community not remembering their language and then not being able to communicate with their parents or their grandparents. So that, I think that break has had lasting implications for passing on culture and language, which has had an impact on our communities. But yeah, I think, did you want to add anything else? Or?
I find it very compelling that both of you talk about in the past not being able to build a relationship with a physician or a nurse. That was a different person every time. That's quite compelling because, as you well know, as we all know, that getting healthy is all about relationships, right? And building with the healthcare provider as well as other people around you. Do you have anything to add to that in your discussion about the present? What's offered in your communities at present? Has there been an improvement in that way about building relationships and having consistency in the community for provision? of healthcare?
For us, we've really come a long way in having decent health care in our own community. And we, through Health Canada, we've set up a clinic that's run basically by a nurse practitioner and public health nurses, and 24 hours round-the-clock care. And part of that care is looking after our elders, having home care. We at one time had sort of a similar thing for elder, like Meals on Wheels, and we shut that one down simply because I visited my dad one day, and he was getting, my mom had passed out, so he was getting off meals. I asked him what happened to the meal, that you didn't eat it. He said, no. He said, that's not for me anyway. I said, no. He said, that's for the dog. I said, really? He said, yeah, that's not fit to eat that stuff. They're healthy meals. And he grew up with meals that you cook with lots of salt and, stuff that he liked. I said, no. And I found out that all the elders were doing the same thing. They were giving it to the dogs or giving it to the kids. So we shut that program down. We have to do something better than that. So, it's a trial and error. If you don't know, what you need to do to build a good, healthy system. And I think we do now. We've come a long way. And having, people go off, young people come back with as a nurse practitioner, we have 2 or 3 in the community. And, public health nurses, we have people that look after young pregnant women. We have programs, aftercare programs, we have daycare. We have all those things as part of the clinic. And we also run something else for our clinic that's a little bit unusual, but we have a job creation program in our clinic that's run by the clinic. And it puts people out to work, and it also helps people that are gone through, you had a baby now and you need some care. So the clinic is here to help them do that. So from the day when my grandmother was a midwife who born probably 400 babies throughout the area to what we have today is night and day. I'm amazed every day when I look across and see the clinic operating or walking into our waiting room. And there's people from not just our community coming to our clinic, but band members from around the bay, around the area that come to our clinic. We also set up what do you call it, a Skype thing with the doctor here in town. So a patient will come into our clinic and they'll talk to their doctor here in town. And that's done through not just our specialists, but other specialists too as well. And also our heart doctor, we call them, come in every 6 months, come in and we open up our clinic to the whole area. So we make, make sure that there's space and there's the client list done up for him when he shows up. We also have a foot specialist that comes in every 6 months to do particularly the elders that need that kind of care. We have a dietitian that comes through every 3 months. So we try to cover off all the things that you would have in the city, but in a little small Aboriginal community, we have all that same kind of health care too as well. And we did have a doctor, Dr. Davies, that came down twice a week in the beginning, then went back to once a week. Now he's retired. And a nurse practitioner has practically taken over that part. They can prescribe medication, do a lot of things that a doctor would have done years ago. But the biggest problem we have right now is that we have to do more work with our own people in terms of self-care. It's not enough to run to the nurse or the nurse practitioner or doctor and say, I have something wrong with me. If we're not looking after ourselves, we're teaching our kids that there is a way that you can look after yourself and not get sick at an early age. such as diabetes, for instance, is rampant in our community now. And it's nice to be able to employ everybody, but at the same time, we have to teach them there's good food that you can have and there's bad food that you can have. And there seems to be more and more bad food around than there is good food. We grew up eating wild foods. Everything we had was boiled. I can't remember ever having any fried food until my dad came home with bacon and made everybody sick with fried bacon. But kids today are not hunting anymore like they used to. We're not eating wild fish like we used to. We're not eating wild berries anymore like we used to. It's easier to go to the store and buy it. But we do have programs that allow people to go out to and help them go out and catch fish. And we're now setting up as part of the program, I believe maybe connected to the university community garden, and it's connected to the school. So some of those things are coming back, but it's a slow process. But from when I grew up to what it is today, is night and day. Not only just with the clinic itself, but also with education in the school and throughout the community. We have a long ways to go yet, but we're getting there.
I also think that we have seen some incredible improvements on the North Coast as well, and a few levels. Chief Joe mentioned some members from your community being educated as nurses or nurse practitioners, and we also have a number of people from our communities who are have gone through the nursing program. Actually, the Memorial partnered with the Nunavut government to deliver an Inuit Bachelor of Nursing program in Labrador, where we graduated, I'm not sure of the exact number, but probably between 10 and 15 students who are nurses, many of whom are now practicing, whether it's with Labrador Health in the clinics or with the Nunavut government Department of Health and Social Development as public health nurses. And we have some nurses in our communities that have been there for a long time. So they're long-term members of the community. I wouldn't say that most of the nurses that come into the community stay for, a real long time, but there are many nurses that do, and when that happens, you can really see the difference in how people feel about going to the clinic. I was home, I was in Postville in May this year, and one of the nurses was just retiring, and a new nurse was coming in, and it was right in that transition phase. And people were very reluctant. People still wanted to go and see the nurse that had been there for a long time, just because they had built up that relationship, and there was trust there. And you can see that when someone leaves who's been there for a long time, that as we all know, it takes time to build up a relationship of trust. So I think that, whether that's in the healthcare system or in whatever, it takes time. So many communities have been lucky that way to have someone in the clinics who've been there for a long time. You also mentioned the telehealth, and that's something that is established in the North Coast communities as well. And I know Dr. Jong has done a lot to really build that on the North Coast. The benefits from that, I think, have been really, we've seen benefits of the telehealth on the in the North Coast communities. So I think for sure there have been improvements. I think we have still a lot of work to do, but I think as long as we're advancing in a positive direction, then we certainly would want to be going the other way. But.
Thank you. So we're now going to move into the future, and this is going to be the wish list. So what would you like to see in your communities as far as healthcare services are concerned? Someone handed you a list and said you're going to dream. We're going to dream big.
God, I've been doing it all my life.
What would you like to see? Would you like to start, Catharyn, or?
Yeah, you start.
Okay.
Then I can follow your dream.
It's when you said dream big, because so we had an opportunity to see the questions beforehand, and it's sometimes hard to let yourself dream big because you know that you're going to be limited by so many things. The first thing that I thought of when I looked at that was I'd love to see a doctor in every community, but I know the reality of that is so slim that it's hard to even let yourself go there. But I think it would be fantastic to have a doctor in every community. In recent years, maybe even in the past year, I've heard of too many cases of things that have been missed and people, it's been caught too late and people have passed away, some too young. And I don't know medicine well, but I don't know if having a doctor would have made a difference or if it would be something specialized. When I think about things like that too, I think that cost is sometimes too prohibitive. When I think about the North Coast communities, and I wonder if things aren't followed through or followed up on because of the cost of sending patients out to get a second opinion or an opportunity to see a specialist. So very often people go to the clinic with a recurring issue and are told, well, it's probably just this, it's probably just a headache, you should go home and take a Tylenol or whatever, and it happens over and over again, and by the time they're sent out, it's too late. So it comes down to financial resources. So I guess I would just, if I was looking to the future, those would be some of my dream big things on the list. But I think, and I brought a couple of copies here, and I handed these out to some people. These are little pocketbooks of the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action. And in them, it lists the guiding principles of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the 94 calls to action, and also at the back is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And it lists all the articles for UNDRIP as well. But there are a number of calls to action in here that relate to the healthcare field, but also, and maybe we'll talk about this later as well, the role of post-secondary institutions in training healthcare professionals, and whether that be people from Aboriginal communities themselves or people who will be working in Aboriginal communities. I think there are a number of things in here that I'd like to see things followed up on from the calls to action and from UNDRIP.
Some of my big dreams have come true already, starting with taking away education from the church in 1987 and bringing it back to Conn River, having all of the teachers in our school be our own band members, having the language taught that was taken away and outlawed by the church that's now being taught in our school, having our first doctor as one of those dreams, having a clinic that can look after our people that's come true. My dreams beyond that is to hold on to the old school and set that up as some kind of training institute where we can invite either MUN to offer programs or colleges to offer programs in that school. That old school is still in good shape, even though the federal government wants us to tear it down. They're not going to do that. It's our school. We own the building, and we need that building to continue it. Don't ever say this outside this room, please. It's my dream. But the clinic has still got a ways to go in terms of the services that we offer and the culinary training. We need to have our own drugstore in the community. We need to have an X-ray machine in our clinic. We need more people that's been trained, nurse practitioners or doctors, whatever, and that will continue with the kind of services that we've come to expect over the last few years. We need to build on that. And again, it comes down to resources, funding. We have to rely on Health Canada for a lot of our services. And that's not going to change until we can start to have a lot of our own source revenues. And that comes with, being allowed to take advantage of the resources that we've been denied all those years. And the TRC addresses some of those things that can help us do that. So my dream is that we continue with what we're doing, more of what we're doing, having an incredible school that will turn out graduates every year, 10, 12 graduates that go on to higher education and follow, role models like John Nick into the medical field. But we also need to spend more time building a relationship with MUN, the colleges, and with the people that we deal with every day, every year. It's not just having seats set aside so that we can have the students from our community come to this facility to take some form of training, but we also need to have a better, really good communications. It's good now, but we need to make it better. And that's some of the dreams that I'm dreaming about. I know I don't have a lot of time in terms of being the chief in the community, but for the little time I got left, I can keep working on that anyway. And who knows, maybe they'll let me work on some things after that. So I'm coming up on an election in June of this coming year, and this is my last little bit of time that I got as chief in the community. So who knows where I'm going to be after that. Maybe they'll put me out to pasture somewhere. But anyway, I'm holding on to the dreams of I've been dreaming for the last number of years, and I've seen some of them fulfilled, and looking at seeing more and more of what we want to do. And thank God, when we went and met with the church committee back in 1983 or 85, and said we wanted to take over education from the church and do it ourselves. And thank God the priest said, if you were fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to get your hands on education knowledge, what are you going to do with it? Because you know absolutely nothing about education. And he's right, I don't. But there's people around me that do. And that's the main thing. I'm surrounded by some incredible, smart, intelligent people. And incidentally, he asked me, was I going to spend the money on cigarette and booze if I got my hands on the money. And when he said I didn't know nothing about education, and what would I do with the school anyway? I said, well, I can't do any worse than you've done. You haven't done anything. So, but at the time, I thought I was an incredible negotiator, because from the time that we asked to take away the education, I think a month later, I think we had the school, the grounds, everything. But we didn't get it because he thought we could do it. We simply got it because he thought we couldn't do it. We would have to give it back. And that was in 1987. And John Nick is our first doctor coming from that taken away school. I'm so proud of you, man.
Yeah. Thank you. And this really moves in very smoothly to the next question.
Are you saying I was smooth?
Oh, you're that too. And a bag of chips. When it comes to medical education, the education of future physicians, what would you like to see included in the medical education program here that would nurture the quality of care that physicians offer to people in your communities? Are there some things that you have in mind that you'd like to see included in that program?
Well, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that I think the Faculty of Medicine has done an incredible job. And Carolyn, you in your role as coordinator for the Aboriginal Health Initiative, I know Memorial is definitely leading the field in Canada. And I've heard that from other people outside the university as well. So I think there are great things happening. Again, I think there's always more that we can do. If I think about the TRC calls to action, I'd like to see that we're following through on all of those. So one of the things they talk about is providing cultural competency training, anti-racism training. I think those are very important for healthcare professionals, whether it's in the Faculty of Medicine, in our School of Nursing, any of the care professions. I think we need to ensure that that we offer that kind of training. I've unfortunately heard comments like, well, you know, I don't know that we need that because I don't see racism. Well, unless you're a person of color or, you know, an Indigenous person, very often you're not going to experience racism. But sadly, we do. And there are too many people in our communities that do. So I think it's important to have that kind of training. I think it's important to certainly keep the Aboriginal Health Initiative. We can't, you know, we certainly can't go back. I've been fortunate to be a part of some of the seminars that you've offered to the various phases of the medical program, the students in the various phases. And I think those kinds of, even though they might just be a class or a couple of classes, they certainly open people's eyes to some different situations that they may not have thought about before. And for the most part, I've been really impressed by the students in those classes and how they are open to different ways of thinking and different ways of knowing and being. Now, it's sometimes different when you're sitting in a classroom setting and you can talk about these things theoretically, but then it could be a different matter when you actually go out and you're working in a community. But I believe there is a program where students can go into Labrador at least and have that opportunity to work in some of the Aboriginal communities in Labrador. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I want to echo what Catharyn said in terms of the kind of atmosphere that you've offered here over the last number of years. I can't imagine doing this 10 years ago. And you know, you've come a long way in terms of acceptance and fostering and promoting an Aboriginal culture in terms of the medical profession. And without that kind of support, I don't think we would have come as far as we have. And it's incredible that it's happening. And I think you're right, it's one of the best things that's happened in Eastern Canada. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I believe this program that we have here is incredible. You can't expect a young person to come to a place like this and excel if they don't have the kind of support that you can offer. And I think in terms of young doctors today and nurses, it's different now and it's tougher because of your training. It's not like it was 20 years ago where you came in, you followed a textbook, you got taught to be a doctor. But today where doctors are faced with a lot of different issues the new law that's coming around that says now that doctors have a right to take a life. So that's reverse of what doctors was taught 20 years ago. And that's going to be a tough one. I can see that. And even in our own culture, we don't always look at that. And I've had a lot of discussions about how that's going to work. Who's going to be responsible for that? Is that left to a doctor? And so it's I think it's going to require a lot of work from the community perspective, and it's going to require a lot of work from your side of things too as well to make that happen to the new doctors and nurses that's coming on stream. And that's going to require a different kind of training altogether. And I think in our own cases, we need to be, telling our students at this stage that are planning to go into that field that here's what you're going to be faced with now. It's not just as simple as going to mid school now. It says I'm going to train to be a doctor and I'm going to set up practice, but it goes deeper, much deeper than that now. And I don't know how Aboriginal communities are going to deal with that because it certainly goes against everything that we've been taught. We've watched people die. I've been watching people die for thousands of years in our own way. But at the same time, we don't want them to suffer either. But we know that it's a new age, a new everything that's happening, and we have to be prepared for that. Not just our kids, but the community have to be prepared for that. And it's not going to be easy. So, I look at what you're doing here as an incredible journey, a new journey, an incredible journey that's going to take a lot of heart and soul, a lot of commitment on both sides, but it's something that we all have to deal with. And I don't envy you the kind of job that you have to do. And I don't envy the young doctors that are going to be faced with that kind of decision somewhere along in their career. Even the older doctors, they're probably struggling more so with this than the younger doctors will, because they've been taught it in a different way.
Thank you so much for your thoughts. Really appreciate it. The final question before we open the floor for questions has to do with research, because another dimension of the Faculty of Medicine is not only physician education, but also research. And so I'm particularly interested in your views about research when it involves people and engages people in your community. So what areas would you think or you feel that are areas of particular importance to people in your community? And the second part of that would be, how to engage Indigenous people in the research. So we're not researching them, but engaging them. So it's not just about them, it's with them. Okay. So do you have any views on that you would like to share with us?
I always like when you answer the question, you make it easier for me.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked the question, two parts together, because the first part is no, I don't. Well, I guess I do have some ideas, but I think for me, because I've been away from my community, I've gone back to visit, but I've been living here in St. John's for 8 or 9 years now. So I'm not in a position to say what would be suitable or appropriate. But the second part of that question is, how do we engage? I think what's really important is that we do engage, and that it's not just how do we engage Aboriginal people and Aboriginal communities to be a part of the research. I think it's engaging at an earlier stage so that Aboriginal communities are a part of the decision-making process to determine what is being researched, so that their priorities, the research is based on the community's priorities. I understand that as academics, people have certain areas of interest that they'd like to pursue, and but I think research needs to be aligned with community priorities, and then communities are involved throughout every stage of the research process. I think that engagement is critical. I think there's been a history of research in Aboriginal communities that has been very detrimental, where people come into communities and research and then leave and take that information with them. I can speak from experience that a lot of people in my home territory and across the north and other Inuit regions are just tired of being researched. People say we're being researched to death. So it is also very, it takes a lot of time for people to be engaged in that research. So if people are going to be engaged, I think it's important that what is being researched is meaningful to the people and to the communities. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I think that as long as the community is involved in research, no matter what that research is, and understand what the research is all about and what is going to happen after the research is done, and that we're part of whatever those findings are, I think we're comfortable with that. But to have someone come into the community, do research, and we've had a number of that happen over the years. And at the end of the day, we don't know what the outcome of that research is all about or what it means to us. The best research that we've ever done is our own. When we partner with the researchers, it helps, because then we have a front row seat in terms of what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what happens afterwards. So it means that as a community, we need to know up front what you're going to be doing and who you're going to be talking to and what happens afterwards. And as long as we have that commitment, we're willing to get involved in any kind of research that needs to be done, but certainly not as it was in the past, where somebody comes in to do research and we never hear from them again. It's more like along the lines, it's my research, I don't care, it may be on your people, but it's my research and it's my right to do whatever I want to do with it. We're a little smarter than we used to be. We now have our lawyers look at it first. And they says that we're all covered off, we can sue, and we go ahead and do it. We never had that in the past. We had to put up whatever was given to us. But thank God, lawyers is around. We don't always like them, but thank God we do have them.
Thank you so much. Now I'd like to open up the floor to you folks to ask questions. So if you do have a question for Chief Joe or for Catharyn, could you please use the mic, because we are recording this event. So pick up.
That was not the height of Newfoundlanders.
Yeah.
First a comment, thank you both very much. I wanted to acknowledge some of the comments that Chief Joe made, and I think it comes as no surprise considering my public health background. Chief, when you were asked questions about healthcare, you quite rightly spoke a little bit about doctors and nurses, and then you talked about the education system, employment, looking after the elderly, having work for people in the community, taking control, bringing your own people in to teach. And from a public health perspective, as important as healthcare is, we all know that those are far more important in terms of creating health. And so I just want to acknowledge how pleased I was to hear you talking about that, and to recognize that you were talking about it a whole lot sooner than settler communities have been talking about it. We're talking about it now, and we're trying to do something about it, but you were talking about it and doing it, and I'm sure the same was happening in the Labrador communities as well. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to acknowledge that we have physicians, as great as John Nick is, there are physicians that have been trained in the program from other communities, other Indigenous communities, so we acknowledge that we've got some physicians that have graduated, some great physicians that have graduated from the other communities. I guess one of the challenges in training people is, at least early in the game, they're coming out one at a time, and they're making choices about their education and where that's going to take them, whether it's into their home communities or into larger communities. One of the challenges, certainly for medicine, is that especially these days, we're getting more and more dependent on the technology and having access to the technology. So a lot of the students may not be going back to their home communities until we create a larger pool. So I guess one of our challenges would be to say, do we focus on getting those students graduated and getting them training other students? Because we know when you can see role models, you're more likely to see that as a possible path. So do we keep John Nick here to help train other students, or do we try our darndest to get John Nick to go back home? I know there's going to be challenges in neurologists to go back home. Is John gone?
Yeah.
He's probably on call.
Yeah.
It's going to be a
We
challenge.
could talk about him now.
Yeah.
It's going to be a challenge to get him to go back as a neurologist, but it's important to have that understanding in the specialist community. But should we be focusing on getting more teachers into the Faculty of Medicine, the Faculty of Nursing from Indigenous communities, or should we be focusing on getting people back into the communities?
Is that a question?
That's a question. I want you to answer it.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, John Nick is already a teacher. Because to become a role model for the community, other people want to follow. They know now that we can do that. And so that, to me, that's a part of that. And we come from an area where there's probably the most 10,000 people. If you're a specialist, it's going to be difficult to go back and after all the time you put into education and make a practice. But part of our funding should be saying that we've funded you for this education for 8, 9, 10 years, however long it takes. You hold the community something. So if we already haven't done that, and I think we have in some cases, we should be saying, at least you come back and you do work with us. And even if it's just going into the school to encourage a young student to follow in, you don't always have to be a doctor. There's other professions too as well. But to me, John Nick is I hold him up as a role model for us. And I realize there's other Aboriginal doctors too as well, but I don't know them. I do know John. So I don't take it as a slight against the other Aboriginal doctors. I'm sure they're role models for their communities. But I look at John as one of our role models for our communities. And he's a nice young man. I'm sure if we told him, listen, you don't come back and work for us, you're going to owe us back a lot of money. No, we wouldn't do that. But we did have, like social workers, for instance, go off to New Zealand to work for a year before they come back to work for us. That was part of our program. So we've set up programs in many areas to allow our community to grow, and we couldn't grow if we didn't have trained people. That included construction workers, heavy equipment operators, nurses, police officers, and doctors. We've done all of that through that same type of co-op program. A pilot went off to fly for another company. We paid him for 2 years to fly for another company before he come back to fly our plane. Our lawyer went off to do his work with another company for 2 years before we let him come back into the community. Every position we have in the community that's in administration position have to work with other people as a shadow management, if you want to call it that, for at least 2 years before they take control of that department. So that's been working for us, and that's all part of the education program. Now, who's to say what we're going to end up doing in terms of John Nick's case? That's something that we have to, I guess, negotiate with John. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, yeah, I wasn't specific to thinking John Nick. I just wanted to acknowledge that we did have other students.
Yes. Thank you.
Can I just add a little bit to that as well? I think it's a great question. And I think we definitely need to attract Indigenous faculty members and teachers into the university. But I think it's also what people are passionate about. So just continue on with John Nick. I mean, if he, he needs to follow his passion. But if we had Indigenous students coming through the medical program who were interested in teaching, I think we need to create opportunities to make that happen for them if they were interested in teaching in the Faculty of Medicine. Right.
Thanks. You talked about the evolution of services, like from 20 years or 30 or more years ago to today. But just like to ask two-part questions, so I'll just ask the first part. One is, so how healthy are the people in general in your communities compared to, say, 25 years ago? Just off.
I would say that there are certainly higher cases, or the rate of diabetes, for example, in our communities definitely gone up. I think tuberculosis has gone up again in one of our communities in particular. And these are just, I don't have any numbers, but just based on anecdotal evidence, I would say rates of cancer have gone up incredibly as well. And as for what the reasons might be, I agree with Chief Joe that partially it's a change in lifestyle as well. So a lot of people are they don't hunt and fish as much as we used to. For example, in Labrador right now, when I was a child, everyone went caribou hunting a couple times a year, and now we can't hunt caribou. There's a ban on hunting caribou, and caribou was a staple. Everyone had, multiple freezers so that you could have caribou meat throughout the year. And right now people can't do that. The cost of hunting and fishing is really high now. Gas is astronomical. The price of gas, the price of a skidoo, the price of a boat and motor are, a lot of people can't afford that. So I think if we look at the health of our communities, I think we can also equate that to a lot of the social inequities in our communities in terms of housing, food insecurity, employment and income and things like that. So, but I would say just anecdotally that there are more health issues today than there were 25 years ago.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that we're not as healthy as we were, even 25, 30 years ago when I was growing up. There was no doctors around, but we didn't need a doctor or a nurse because everybody looked after everybody else. And we made, and I take full blame for this along with my fellow counselors. I wouldn't take it all by myself. But trying to be kind and make sure that we had everything that the outside world had, we made it easier for them to become unhealthy. I think I would say we have half and half in terms of healthy people that are trying to live a healthy lifestyle and those that don't care. We made it possible for to have 100% employment in the community. We look at that as a good thing, but on one hand, it allows people to buy unhealthy food and in some cases have an unhealthy lifestyle. So it's a double-edged sword in many ways. And the other part of that, what we need to be doing, we need to be more conscious of building healthier programs for our people and doing a better job at teaching the people that don't understand that if you're going to live a healthy lifestyle, you can't go into the store and buy French fries and store-bought meat because we do have a food fishery which allows you to go fish. And I know people are still hunting, which is a good thing, and we lost caribou too as well. So, but thank God we got a lot of moose. And people are still eating wild game like beaver and other things, and people still go berry picking those things, so that helps. And the one good thing I have to say about having 100% employment, at least for a portion of the year, we have control over their lives in some ways. We can create programs that get them out on the land and doing things that they should be doing, so that helps.
You don't have to convince me. I got my moose, and hopefully my wife doesn't figure out how expensive it really was. So a two-part question. So the second part is, I'm a computer nerd, so that's a technology one. You were saying that you'd love to see if you could dream a doctor in every community. Each community have a doctor. But, we have to think differently nowadays, right? So would you go with the idea of having a doctor on the screen by telehealth in each community, and then people in the community, other healthcare providers, providing the hands-on stuff that a doctor who's on TV kind of thing couldn't do? I mean, do you think that would be a good way to provide better services?
For me, that works because we're already doing that to some degree. It's a little difficult with older people who don't want to be part of that. They would rather sit down across the table from a doctor and hear the doctor. You look at that little screen talking to a doctor about something they don't even know the doctor who it is. So that's a deterrent too as well. But for the younger people, all for it, because when we took over the school, we computerized the school, then we computerized the community. Because everybody worked for us, we set up a payroll deduction so that when kids went home, they had computers at home. So that worked really well. So the whole community is computer crazy. So I think telehealth is one things that to have a specialist or a doctor can certainly work that way for us. At least I think so anyway. Now, for me, I just want to tell you this. My doctor came from this facility not too long ago. He's now my doctor, and I'm amazed that I got him on speed dial. I could call him anytime and ask any question I want, which is amazing. And I scratch my head over it many times because I come from a time when I never thought I could do that. And not only that, I got the premier on speed dial. I'm really moving up in the world.
They're all set. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Actually,
I'll just say,
Okay, yeah.
about to add on to the second part of the question, I definitely agree with Chief Joel that with the older population in the communities, it's not ideal. I think I can see it working better with younger people. I don't think it's an ideal situation, but again, going back to the realities of the world we live in, I think it's probably a situation, you know, that we can make the best of a situation where we can't have physicians in each of the communities. I mean, with communities like Macovik, Polsville, and Riglet that have, you know, between 300 and 350 people, it's just not realistic to have a doctor in that community because you're just not going to see someone every day, or you might see one person every day, but I mean, so I can understand the realities of that, just it's not realistic. But I think when, you know, to try to make the best of the situation, I think that's probably the way to go.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Okay, if not, Dr. Steele, would you come, and she has a token of appreciation for you. We really appreciate you being here.
So I'll just take the microphone.
Yes.
So I want to thank both of you for coming and to share your insights on the past, the present, and the big dreams. And I'm hoping the Faculty of Medicine will be part of your big dreams and that will make things happen. You know, for me, it's interesting how I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, so I love to hear when people are so proud of people in their community. So that came through, and I have to say, I experienced it. I went to Miramichi in New Brunswick, and I went to Ile Ground, which is a health clinic for those of you who don't know. And one of the people who worked there is from Con River. And the first thing she said to me was, "I'm so proud we have John Nick." And it was wonderful. So we're very proud that we have John Nick as well, and all the other Indigenous students that we have here. I'm glad you raised the issue about the truth and reconciliation. As you know, all organizations across the country are looking at how we can do things better. And so I've talked to Carolyn, and we're hoping in the new year we'll actually set up a committee and a plan, including the communities, to actually look at what we're doing with respect to the truth and reconciliation and make sure that we're actually putting things in place to make that happen. So input would be really helpful. The other thing for me is I'm a CFA, I come from away, and so I'm not only learning about Newfoundland and Labrador, but I'm also learning a lot about the Indigenous people in general, but also in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I'm looking forward to hearing and listening a lot of things in the future. So, and I want to thank Carolyn for moderating the session, but also because Carolyn really has been the leader in our Aboriginal Health Initiative and has done a wonderful job, which you have all commented on. So again, thanks very much. And these are just a little token of our appreciation for you coming. Thank you. There you go, Chief Joe.
Oh, thank you so much.
So again, thanks very much, and thank you all for coming. And there's some food and stuff at the back if you'd like to grab that.